Mini episode 1438 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge Mini episode 1438. You've got two FDH Lounge original dignitaries here today. It is I, Rick Morris, joined by my close, longtime personal friend, Chris Galloway, my fellow original dignitary. Chris has been, over the last couple of years, kind of our lead guy on Talking NFL. We've had good rotation of some other folks in the mix here, but push comes to shove the last couple of years. In following in the footsteps of Kyle Ross, I think it's been Chris who's been the guy who's been on the most over the course of a year talking NFL. So who better to have on for our Championship Sunday preview here in 2022? And I always say very snobbily here that this is sort of the equivalent of the Super Bowl for the real fans out there. You know, you have your casuals that like to go to their Super Bowl party and not know shite from shinola and about the game and everything like that. But if you really love the game of football, this doubleheader that sets it up, I feel like is just as great for you, if not better. And again, really looking forward to it as always, as well as our preview with my man Chris Galloway. Chris, it's almost Championship Sunday here, pal. Happy early Championship Sunday.
Rick, I know that is your favorite day of the year.
One of them, buddy. One of them.
I know for you it is a religious experience. And I know that you must be excited about traveling to your own virtual Mecca this Sunday, i.e. your living room couch.
Actually,
so that you may pray at the Paul Tagliabue gods, and it should be exciting. Although I have to say, gonna be hard to pass up what happened last weekend in the divisional series. That was, and I know you're always Mr. rain down on it, but that was some of the best football we have seen ever in our lifetimes in one weekend. Those four divisional games were unbelievable. They
were. And even if the same thing being said by 100 million different people after the game on Twitter about the best weekend of football ever was a little excessive, yeah, I can't argue with that. And as far as it goes this weekend, that might have been the initial plans, Chris, but the sometimes referred to on this show Wolfpack, all my fellow FDH Lounge dignitaries, Dave Adams, John Adams, Ron Glasnap. Evidently, we will be convening in Dave's basement for the game. So the Wolfpack will be enjoying the game collectively here on Sunday. So that will be tremendous. All the better to soak in the greatness of this weekend, which, again, in contrast to what we saw 2 weekends ago, which, again, we talked about this before the playoffs even started. Overexpanded, 7 teams in each conference. The fact that the Squealers and the Raiders made it in the AFC showed that there weren't even 6 teams worthy of being in there, which I know reflects even worse on our Browns for me to say that. So the first weekend was dog crap, one of the worst ever. And again, there is a lot of times an evening out effect. Even if FDH Lounge dignitary Ben Chu sometimes argues with me about the law of averages and things don't always even out, I always tend to see regret. That's an eternal argument. He and I will be screaming at each other about that until we're in our respective nursing homes, zooming each other to scream about that.
Listen, and here's what you can do when you're in that nursing home.
Yes.
Right?
Uh-huh.
When Ben dies, you can be at his service and say, I told you things balance out. You're dead. I'm alive.
Chris,
see, it balances out, Ben.
Chris, since Ben is younger than us, it might be the other way around, where Ben would at least be forced to concede at my funeral. Well, Rick,
well,
you
there
were.
You go. That also works. He'll have to say, Rick, you you were right.
That's right. I think that might be the likelier scenario of the two, but I mean, it worked out the way I might have thought. That weekend 2 was a lot better than weekend 1, and that is a mild understatement at best, more than a mild understatement. But I wonder if it's the funnel effect, though, Chris, because you've got two teams on paper. The Bengals that look like an incomplete team. On the AFC side, that offensive line, I mean, for Joe Burrow to get sacked 9 times, but the team still advances, was really incredible. And quarterback being the biggest question mark for San Francisco and what they've been able to get done there. So Cincinnati and San Francisco, the road teams, the dogs, they look like somewhat kind of incomplete teams, even if, and we'll get to when we get to the NFC game later, even though San Francisco has gotten the better of the Rams the last couple of times. I wonder if coming off of that zenith of football weekend, if it might start to go the other way into some games that may not live up to what we're hoping for.
I think that's possible, but I just think that these teams, based on their track record on the last part of the season and the momentum they've built, the Rams 49ers, especially on their history, recent history, their competitive nature, the rivalry there, the fact that the 49ers have won 5 straight. I just don't believe that you're going to have, as you like to say, a shite game. I think we're looking at 2 really great games again coming our way. And you're right. The Bengals are an incomplete team. The Chiefs are certainly much more balanced and rounded at this point. The line for the Bengals, I expect Joe Burrow to get sacked 9 more times this week.
Wow.
And somehow Joey just gets right back up and just keeps going at it. And clearly the Bengals are going to have to address that line finally in the offseason. They're going to have to do something. I mean, dear God. But I think ultimately the Bengals offensive line, along with the defense that's not particularly championship worthy, will end up costing the Bengals on Sunday in terms of being able to advance to the Super Bowl. I expect Burrow to have another great game. I expect their offensive weapons to play well, but I just think that Cincinnati will outlast them. That said, Cincinnati expended a lot. I remember Kansas City expended a lot of energy and a lot of mojo in that last game. And you do worry, if you're a Chiefs fan, if that's a little bit of burnout there in terms of their ability to rise to the occasion one more time. But I think with Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes, they'll be able to overcome the Bengals because of the Bengals' shortcomings. You don't need to look any further than that game they played a few weeks ago. That it was competitive right to the end, and that's why I think it will be.
It was.
And then you look at the other game. I mean, look, the 49ers just have the Rams' number. They match up both coaching and personnel wise. But I do think, and we'll touch on this later. I picked the 49ers to be my Super Bowl champ preseason. I had the 49ers beating the Browns in the Super Bowl. Wouldn't it be ironic if we ended up with a 49ers-Bengals Super Bowl?
Right.
Boy, I'd feel awfully close on that one. And then I would just simply remind you at the end of the season, Rick, that when I said Browns, I just meant a Paul Brown established football team.
Brown and orange uniforms. Brown and orange. You called it.
I was referring to Paul Brown. You misunderstood.
Yes.
I got it 100% right.
Yes.
I also because I was my preseason pick, you have to ride or die with your pick. So I've got to pick the 49ers. Although if I hadn't made that pick and I was sitting here today, I would say to you, 6 in a row over the Rams with that firepower and that talent and at home, really? Would you bet against that? At this point, I probably wouldn't. I'll stick with the 49ers just because I have to. But if I was starting from scratch right now, my money would be on the Rams.
Well, you really summed up both games there, Chris. So all I got to say is have a good night, everybody.
No. There's lots of minutia to dive into.
Okay. All right. Well, yes.
Shortest FDH Lounge segment ever. Hey, thank you very much.
Or at least there wasn't a solo one. Absolutely. So the early one here, it'll be on CBS, 3 o'clock Eastern, Sunday. Natty on the road here at KC, getting 7.5 from the Chiefs as we tape right now. In looking at this, and again, these teams matching up. They had that battle a couple weeks ago in Cincinnati, where the Bengals came out the 34-31 winner, and that was key in helping them win the AFC North division. And again, in looking at this here, and I want to refer everyone yet again to available on the main page at fantasydrafthelp.com, our 2021 FDH end of NFL regular season breakdown with our big sort of statistical roundup. One of the things that's very interesting is that there is one thing on here that's like lies, damned lies, and statistics, because you look at it in terms of defensive rushing.
Thank you, Benjamin Disraeli.
Yes, he would really love what I've got to say about Joe Mixon and the Bengals, because when you look at the Chiefs here, when you look at all the different categories that are listed here, and this is a very comprehensive statistical index, if I do say so myself, the Chiefs only 21st in defensive rushing yards. Now, their defense this year, as it has improved, it has still been a bend but don't break defense. So you can move the ball on them. I mean, they're 27th in passing yards, but on their DSRS advanced number, they are 5th in the league, whilst being 27th in overall defensive yards. So highly indicative of bend but don't break. 21st defensive rushing. So you can run the ball on them, in other words. You look at the Bengals, and here's the lies, damn lies, and statistics. 23rd in offensive rushing yards. And I had to do a double take when I saw this, but Joe Mixon was 3rd in the league in rushing. What it is Cincinnati, in a league now where it's running back by committee with a lot of teams, when Cincinnati runs the ball, it's pretty much with Joe Mixon. He probably has more of a disproportionate number of the yards on the ground for the Bengals than anybody else. So if we were using, instead of offensive rushing yards, yards by the lead back, Cincinnati moves to 3rd in the league from 23rd. They would jump up 20 points on our rankings here, which instead of putting them 17th overall, would slot them at 11th at the top of our 4th tier. So that makes a little bit of a difference. So Cincinnati probably fits more in that range and certainly closer to the other teams in the field than it would look like based on, because that 23rd really pulls them down significantly. There are some defensive numbers that aren't as pretty, but that's what you would expect. Cincinnati's been pretty good on the ground, though 5th in defensive rushing yards. That said, when they played each other a couple weeks ago, it was the Chiefs that really worked more to establish the run. And Cincinnati, that I don't want to say necessarily gave up on it as much as they did, but they didn't stick with it as much. Again, it's hard to criticize them in a winning effort. But you did have Joe Mixon on the ground, 12 carries for, I think it was 46 yards. And that was not exactly a thing of sticking with it as much as they could have. And I'm looking at it this time around, and I'm wondering if there shouldn't be maybe more of a concerted effort by the Bengals to establish Mixon on the ground, try to dominate time of possession a little bit more. They came out kind of even the first time around. Or if Andy Reid, and maybe this is going way inside the looking glass, if Andy Reid wasn't anticipating they might try to do that in establishing the rushing game to the extent that he did last time around, thus sort of forcing Cincinnati's hand to go with Joe Burrow more so than Mixon. So as far as what each team was thinking and everything like that, you can get a little too cute or a little bit too clever. But my sense, if you're Cincinnati and you got to approach this as a game where you got nothing to lose, I think that means establishing Mixon even more than he did last time. What say you?
I agree with that. I think especially because you're on the road.
Yes.
That last game was in Cincinnati.
Yep.
And there are certain advantages, i.e., the pass protections and other things you got to call. And we know that Arrowhead is an extremely loud, difficult place to play.
Yes.
And it will be rocking in the AFC Championship game. Joe Burrow won't be able to hear himself think.
Yes.
And with a subpar offensive line struggling to pass protect for Joe in that environment, it makes all the sense in the world to try to establish the run and get Joe Mixon going. To your point, that makes all the sense. That is the traditional coach think, right?
Yes, exactly.
So, and we live in a world now when it comes to NFL coaching that if that's what everybody thinks, suddenly coaches go, let's do the opposite.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And that is the coaching game in the game. You know?
Right.
Taylor's sitting there going, what does Andy Reid think we're going to do? What does he expect me to do? You know?
Right.
And then it becomes well, what if I go ahead and do that? Does he think then that I know that he knows what I know? And so therefore he thinks he's going to switch to what I think. So therefore, because he's going to switch, I think back and I'll go back to the original plan that he does now not think I'm going to do. Like, these guys will get in their own head on it, no doubt about it.
Inside the looking glass, as I said. I mean, that's where we are. I mean, we are, as far as trying to anticipate what both of these teams are going to do, what the strategy is going to be, because that's how they're looking at each other. That's exactly right. And it's a situation where, again, on the road in this situation, and it's easy to be too reductive on a lot of these things here. And sometimes I walk that line because I do have these strong gut feelings that I just go with. And my gut feeling on this, even if some intellectual wants to tell me that this is far too reductive, I don't care. I'm going with this statement here. If the Bills couldn't win a 42-36 game in Kansas City, the Bengals sure as hell aren't. So you can't count on going in there and like, well, just so long as we get the ball last at the end of the game. Because as we saw, 13 seconds is still too long to give the ball back to Kansas City, albeit not if you squib kick it. But that's another discussion for another day, Bills Mafia? But
Well, and not only that, I would say this. The Bills have a hell of a lot better defense than the Bengals.
Yes, exactly.
So to your point, you're the Bengals. You can't get into a shootout in Arrowhead.
Right.
I just don't see it. I agree.
Yes.
And so everything else aside, I agree. They've got to try to establish Nixon. They've got to take some pressure off of Joe Burrow, and they got to find a way to keep him protected. So yeah, no, that makes sense, and I think that is what they will do. It's just try to shorten the game, find some spots for Joe Burrow to take advantage, and then that's where I think it'll go. I do think it'll be a lower scoring affair because the Bengals, even though statistically their defense is not great, as of late, they've been pretty solid in terms of just getting the job done. You know what I mean? Like, that's not a statistic. I get it. But if you watch the Bengals in the second half of the season, that defense, they just find a way to make a play here and there and get off the field. And so, it's the Bengals, the Chiefs are the bend but don't break. The Bengals have been that as well in the second half.
They really have been, yeah.
So I think that, that's what you're going to see primarily is Cincinnati trying to run the ball more. But I wouldn't be surprised if, look, we all know this. This game starts off and Kansas City somehow quickly gets up 14-0. That's out the window. Joe Burrow's going to be throwing that ball all over the field.
Absolutely.
And they won't have a choice. Because you get behind on Patrick Mahomes like that, you're not catching up.
Oh, no question about it. Yeah, that's going to force their hand. Here's something where this is going to bring back a little bit of PTSD for perhaps the first half of the season here for us as Browns fans. Not that it wasn't an issue all year long, but third down defense for Cincinnati, it is below average, 22nd. And unsurprisingly for Kansas City, first in the league. And if that statistic is destiny, this game won't even be close. If the Bengals have to get some stops on third down or they are going to get run off the field.
Yep, 100%.
So they have to arise to the occasion on that. And there's another factor here again, too. And this is where, again, I like to blend the stats with the gut feelings and the things that a lot of the sharps might perhaps look down their nose at. But there is a little bit of a factor in Cincinnati being in this game of what one might call the really bro factor as far as picking a team to make the Super Bowl. And that's when, 9 times out of 10, it's when a team is making a big jump, really kind of coming from nowhere. And by the way, let's take a moment to put ourselves over. While hardly anybody was calling for the Bengals to make the playoffs at the beginning of the year, go back to our 2021 AFC North preview. We got the receipts. We both said the Bengals would be better than anybody thought, even though neither one of us picked them to make the playoffs. Nevertheless, it is still an unfathomable jump just eyeballing the Bengals the season that they've had, expecting them to be in the Super Bowl. I realize they're just a game away, but it tends not to work out that way. You go back to and I hope that this isn't a good point of comparison for our boy Joe Burrow, who we're both fond of, but it somewhat reminds me of the Jets the 2 years under Mark Sanchez when they made it to the AFC Championship game. And I remember being pissed the one year they were playing the Steelers. I was like, oh, great, the Steelers get cannon fodder. They get to move past to make the Super Bowl. The Bengals are not cannon fodder, but I think it's still the same thing. Having said that, what might have been an exception to the rule a year ago, had the Browns been able to beat the Chiefs in Kansas City, I don't think they would have had that factor going for them in the AFC Championship game because they would have already beaten the Goliath. At this point, Cincinnati doesn't have that win to point to other than, yes, they beat Kansas City late in the season on their own home field. That's a big win. But that's not a win that's on par where you can say, oh, they could legitimately be a team I could imagine in the Super Bowl. It's still that leap of faith, I think, looking at them to picture them being in the big game in 2 weeks.
Yeah, they don't seem like they're ready.
No.
They seem like they've had a great run, and they benefited from a team like the Browns with a banged-up quarterback and COVID, wreaking havoc and allowed them to slide in.
Yep.
I mean, let's not forget something. I mean, to your point about the opening weekend games and how awful they were and lopsided, that was a function because there were a bunch of teams that, frankly, just weren't worthy of the playoffs in the playoffs.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the reality is that the Browns swept the Bengals this year, and they're not in the playoffs.
Right.
So, I think that, a couple breaks going a different way. Not that the Browns were a complete team, but they were, I think if you look at the team, they were certainly a better team than a couple of those that snuck in. And just more of a sense of circumstance than anything. So that's why we had the lopsided. The Bengals have sort of benefited that as well from winning the AFC North. I think some of us who have not been Lamar Jackson believers are pointing a little bit today to saying, well, see, I mean, if he's not clicking on all cylinders, they're coming back to the pack.
Right.
And that defense is certainly falling apart as well.
Yep.
I mean, look, this year you could make an argument, and again, this would be an unusual one, but, Hundley certainly played better than Jackson in the games he played in.
Yeah.
And he was the street free agent, undrafted.
Right.
I think the Bengals benefited from a division that, for one reason or another, fell back to where to a place that I think none of us really thought they'd be that far back. So they got in. And plus, to their credit, they got hot. They're getting great quarterback play out of our boy Joey. But I don't think that they are a Super Bowl quality team right now. And that doesn't mean they won't get in. I mean, they can beat the Chiefs. They can beat them.
Yeah.
I just don't think they're going to in Arrowhead. I just think it's done. Like, they've gotten as far as they're going to go.
They have that feel about them, and also playing the fraudulent number one seed in the AFC, Tennessee. Team where when I tried to call the consumer fraud hotline on them, they told me that's not what we're here for, sir, and they weren't very nice about it. But regardless, I was right. The Titans were a fraud.
Rich Cordray.
Yes. There's a great Ohio reference. I love it. And, beating Tennessee, again, I mean, you won on the road, but that's about as much faint praise as I can give you for beating a team like that. It was the Titans with Derrick Henry back for his first game, and they kept him relatively well bottled up, even without Ogunjobi, even with some issues on the defensive line. And quite frankly, that's why I mistakenly thought Tennessee was going to win, because I thought Cincinnati's defensive line was too banged up. They rose to the occasion. They got here. This feels about as far as they're going to go. The 7.5, it's one of these things where it feels like a coin flip on whether or not. I know that in my mind, Kansas City's going to win. I think it's a coin flip on the cover, but I think, to be honest with you here, I think it's more of a risk to say that Cincinnati covers, because there is the chance this one gets out of hand. So I'm going to take.
I agree. I would go Kansas City 32-24.
That sounds about right to me. That sounds really absolutely about right. So we're both in alignment on that game here. The other game, the nightcap here on Fox, it is San Fran at the Rams. And San Fran, as of right now, they are getting 3.5 as we speak. this is one of these things where we've talked about this, that they've had the Rams number, as you said. What is it? The last 5 or 6 they've won. They won both of the games.
5 in a row.
This
Five
year.
in a row.
And that's one of these weird things here, because when we talk about how they've done it, it's been very unlikely to me, and it's what's going to lead me to pick the Rams, because I just can't see the unlikelihood continuing. But as far as making the unlikelihood happen with the matchups here, I will take my hat off to Kyle Shanahan. I've bashed him on the show for his record in Super Bowls. He has, as both an offensive coordinator and as a head coach, he has disgraced himself on the biggest stage. But some of the other things he's able to do show that he does in many ways. It's a bifurcation here. He does in many ways live up to the, great young offensive mind kind of a thing here. What he's been able to do on the Rams, particularly exploiting the power running on a team where it's a little bit unlikely that you'd be able to do that to them. I got to take my hat off to him. I don't know how long they can keep it up without the Rams making those adjustments, but it's worked thus far, and they got to be in Sean McVay's head at this point, I'll tell you.
Oh, they clearly are. I mean, they are occupying real estate, and I hedged everything on the opener. I'm picking the 49ers because I have to.
Right.
If I wasn't already pot committed to the 49ers preseason, my money would be on the Rams for the exact reasons you give. Man, it's hard to beat a team 3 in a row in this league.
Yep.
6 in a row?
Yeah.
Unless you're the Steelers over the Browns in the last 20 years, that's pretty damn hard to do.
Let me do my impression of FDH Lounge dignitary Ben Chu. Chris, what happened in any past game has no bearing on what happens this game. It has no bearing on the present events whatsoever, the fact that it's 6 in a row. That's what he would say. I happen to agree with you, Chris. I agree with you.
Well, I actually would say from a mathematical standpoint, he's 100% right.
Right.
But the law of averages do eventually start to kick in.
Yep.
And it's not always in a thing like football, it's averages. It's just, if you play 24 games, it doesn't mean they're going to be 12 and 12. It just means you're probably not going to be 24 though.
Right.
You may end up being, 18 and 6. But
right.
That being said, I just think that it's hard for me to believe the Rams kind of have it going on right now. They went on the road. They got their Tom Brady scare. They almost had their Atlanta Falcons moment. They avoided it, thanks to Stafford doing what he had to do at the end. And if for no other reason than just to torment Browns fans to see OBJ in the Super Bowl, I have a feeling that the Rams are probably going to triumph in that one.
I think so as well, yeah, and that will be aggravating, and all of the OBJ vindication crap that'll be flying around because he's actually trying and making an effort out there for once. But I will say this as well here, in terms of the law of averages, which, like I said, I agree with you completely. It's one of these things where just because we can't explain it doesn't mean it's not real. And I go back to the all-time example of this, the previous season, picking all the games week after week against the spread. After week 7, I was up to like 65%. And I was like, oh boy, it's all downhill from here. I had a terrible week, and then I decided, you know what? I'm going to lean into this crash with the 18-wheel truck here. And I turned a 3-11 week into an 11-3 week by doing a George Costanza. I went against my instincts on every game. I went 11-3. And I said to Ben, what do you think about that? And he goes, you just got lucky. I'm like, look, dude, just because I can't explain how it happened doesn't mean it's not real. There's ups and downs. There's peaks and valleys. Not everything evens out 100% in life, but it happens a lot of the time, and that is something that the Niner fans should be concerned about.
That is correct. But now, back to our original talking point.
Yeah.
This is another one that's based on these teams' histories and the psychology of the coaching matchup.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be very, 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 very close. I think this is a game that's going to come right down to the end. And I think it's inevitable. More so than even the Chiefs-Bengals game. I think this is a last play of the game type of matchup is what we're going to see.
Well,
maybe a field goal, the drive to win it at the end. Something along those lines.
Well, and again, on the whole thing of like who can say how or why these things happen, but they're an immutable fact of life. If the Bengals somehow win the opener, look, dude, the only two times they've ever made the Super Bowl, they've played the 49ers. I mean, it feels like it's destiny if the Bengals win the opener. And
That is a funny thing. If we end up with Niners Bengals again, that is just hilarious. It's like, can we play somebody else besides the 49ers?
Yes. That's where I was joking with you the other day about on the last drive of the game for the Niners, they're going to have to beam up a hologram with John Candy in the stands for Jimmy Garoppolo to point to. You know, we're going to have to recreate.
Exactly.
You know? And that
would be classically funny.
Dude, and that is, you know, for any of you kids out there, go Google that. That is a deep in the weeds reference. I'm the first to admit, but you know, when you look at this here, here's one of the things that's interesting is that the Rams, they have a very, very good rushing defense. And again, obviously with one of the greatest defensive tackles of all time, heck, one of the greatest defensive players of all time, Aaron Donald, inside. You'd expect nothing less. The tackles are somewhat more the foundation of that run defense than the ends, even though the ends are very good as well. That said, and looking at the numbers here, as we go back to this end of regular season breakdown, available on the main page at fantasydrafthelp.com, this is hilarious to me. The Rams are 6th in defensive rushing yards. The 49ers are 7th. The Rams were, I think, only like 6 yards better than them the whole season. But you know what? If the Rams didn't have to play the 49ers, I bet you they'd be 2nd or 3rd. I mean, it is San Francisco that has been able to uniquely attack them. And like I said, more so going at the ends, more so going outside than up the middle. But the way that they've done this, it's a thing where, again, you have a significant disparity at quarterback, as you did last week with Garoppolo. He survived on the road at Green Bay, although you and I talked about this ahead of time. San Francisco, stylistically, far more the cold weather team than the Packers, which we saw. The Packers are more of a finesse type team playing in cold weather. The 49ers are built for that type of weather, as we saw. But you're looking at another week here. If you just look at, again, the law of averages of Jimmy G overcoming. I mean, look, Matt Stafford is not elite on the level of Aaron Rodgers, but he is at least a borderline elite quarterback. And Jimmy G, who made it to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, this is one of these things where the way that we saw him then versus how we saw him now. Jimmy G won the first 5 games of his career as a starter in San Francisco. Then he got injured, and then they had that run to the Super Bowl. So there's Jimmy G as we saw him then. And that's not the Jimmy G that we see now. He looks more like one of these guys in the whole Kirk Cousins, Baker Mayfield type level. Now, an Eli Manning guy like that won 2 Super Bowls, so you never know. But if you're just looking at the law of averages, Stafford versus Garoppolo, can the 49ers for a 7th time in a row overcome? Now, it hasn't been Stafford as quarterback all 7 times, as we know. My guy Jared Goff was in there for some of it. But just saying that again, the law of averages, the better quarterback. Look at the AFC Championship game. It's Burrow and it's Mahomes. This is a thing where the 49ers are an outlier in terms of where the teams are in the NFL today. The Buffalo certainly deserved to be in the AFC Championship game again this year with Josh Allen. On and on and on. Examples proliferate, and San Francisco at this point is the exception to that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think that speaks to your pick in this game. The law of average. And right now, Ben is just like screaming into his radio. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. These guys just keep ignoring it. I think you're going to have. I think Stafford is the more dynamic quarterback right now. Garoppolo is not performing at a championship level. That said, that guy just finds a way sometimes, though. He'll show up. You talk about law of averages, Rick. I'll give you one, all right?
Okay.
What do we both know about these quarterbacks? Matt Stafford has an incredible ability at the worst moment to shit the bed.
He can.
And then Jimmy Garoppolo, when you write him off for dead, will suddenly throw for 380 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Right.
And I got to think Jimmy G, even though he's going to be on the road, is going to be feeling fine inside that beautiful $5 billion stadium. Temperatures mild, no bad weather. It's not going to be nice and warm. I think he's going to be perfectly fine operating in that environment, which I think is, again, the 49ers are built like a cold weather team except for their quarterback.
True.
And so I think Jimmy will be very comfortable in this game. So again, Matt Stafford, innate ability to absolutely be awful at the worst possible moment. I think if you're a Rams fan, you've got to be scared to death of that. And if you're a 49er fan at this point, the way the season started and the talk about, Trey Lance and you're going to move off of Garoppolo, and again, our preseason prediction, I said this. I said they're going to draft this guy, they're going to mortgage the future, and then they're going to go win the Super Bowl with Jimmy G, and then be faced with a whole thing about, well, now what do we do? And by God, that prediction is so close to coming true.
Yeah, that is true. You're right about that. And ultimately, in looking at this here, and again, let's not forget the great factor of Deebo Samuel for San Francisco, a true Swiss Army knife as far as all the things that he can do, rushing, receiving, whatever. By the way, one last point on Jimmy G. Before you expanded on your point, when you said Jimmy G should be feeling fine when they get to LA, I wasn't quite sure until you expanded on your point if there was the hint of a leer in your voice there, if you were somehow indicating that porn star might show up in his room the night before the game or whatever. So,
I'm gonna assume that was a one-time blind date.
Yes, exactly. I wasn't sure if you were going there initially.
You were like, where's he going with this?
That's right.
That's not where I was going.
And then you actually made X's and O's points there and brought it back. But, yes, when you're just looking at, again, so you got Deebo Samuel on the one side, Cooper Kupp, who has just become an all-world type player, and somebody who just stabbed me right in the groin in my fantasy football championship game here this year, playing against him. So there's that. But one wonders also, too, because San Francisco has been good at getting pressure on Stafford in the games where they've been able to beat them. So whether it be now that you have more of a full complement in the backfield of having Cam Akers back in there in the mix, maybe getting some screen passes in there. They went a little bit more to Tyler Higbee the second game, where they were at least more successful offensively, even though they didn't win the game. One wonders what McVay might have up his sleeve to try to keep Bosa and company out of the backfield, because he hasn't had much luck in the previous two games keeping that from happening.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. I think it's the defensive line matchup in this game that's going to decide. The one that gets it done, each team's defensive line has got to rise to the occasion, dominate, and that's who you're going to see. That's going to win. That's who's going to win this ball game.
I agree with that. I think it is going to be very decisive in that regard as far as how they can make that happen. And again, just all the weapons on both sides of the ball. You've got, of course, as I said, Aaron Donald, quite possibly the best player on the field. Again, he hasn't been enough to make the difference for the Rams to win against San Francisco recently. The one thing, if I'm a Rams fan, that might make me a little bit concerned, because this was the thing where it was my first thought on this game, is that what San Francisco really has going against them, and this is always a team that I'm giving the fisheye to whenever this is said about them, not built to come back. San Francisco not built to come back. And then I remembered, oh, that's right, they came back from 17 down to beat the Rams the last time they played them. Now, again, I'm going to put that under anomaly, and that they've been able to do things against the Rams that I think ultimately will not be sustainable in this game. But they've blown up the narrative that they're not a team. Now, again, they fell behind 17-0 relatively early. I mean, there was still 6 minutes to go, second half. Again, they were able to put a dent in that with a field goal right before halftime. Then it's a 2-touchdown game. But 2 touchdowns is still a lot when you look at the Rams' explosiveness versus what the 49ers have to offer. But they were patient. They stuck with the run. They came back. It didn't help the Rams that Jimmy G, it was good Jimmy G on that day, and he was able to kind of help bring them back. But it'll be interesting to see.
You also need to look at what happened in that Rams Buccaneers game.
Yes.
The Bucs were struggling offensively and the Rams just couldn't put them away.
Right.
And so I think you cannot downplay the psychological element that what they went through the week before, and then they get into it with their rival. If they get into that sort of situation where they get up and then the 49ers are coming back, it's going to, what happened to them previously against the 49ers and then what happened the week before against Tom Brady, i.e. Jimmy's buddy, they're going to be thinking about it. They'll say, no, it doesn't matter. But it's human nature, man. They're going to be thinking about the week before and the last time they played the 49ers. Their sphincters will get so tight. And I think you're right that the 49ers, in general, are not a come-from-behind team, but they've done it. And then you look at the Rams; they let somebody come back in last week that was struggling, and it's not like the Bucs were fully loaded last week. They were having problems on that line. They're down a wide receiver or two. Brady didn't look that sharp towards the season, and the Rams let him right back in the game. So I don't think that there's I think you're right in general that the 49ers are not built that way, but and I don't think this game's going to go that way. I don't see either one of these teams jumping out to a big lead. I think this is going to be one of those classic Rams 49ers games that's a grinded out slugfest, defensively oriented, score, touchdown, halftime is 10-7, and then we come back out. So then maybe there's a quick score, 49ers go up, Rams come back, score 2, go up 10, 49ers come back, get a touchdown. You know what I mean? It's going to be one of those things. No one's going to get too far out front. And again, I think it'll come down to the very, very end.
I agree exactly with what you're saying because I believe in the end that the Rams are going to win and cover. But that said, there is a number in this game that is going against them as I look at the statistics here. That's a mirror image of what we talked about in the AFC Championship game, that the Rams defensively, 21st in third down defense. San Francisco, believe it or not, first in the red zone offensively. And that I would ascribe probably primarily to the power running game, particularly in a year where George Kittle was hurt a good chunk of the year. You can't say it was necessarily lobbing it to Kittle in the end zone that much. I think the power running game down there. But regardless of how they did it, they did it. So that is a thing where, again, you have to look at that and see what the capability is going to be. By the way, on the third down defense here, this is a thing I believe, and I think the league should probably investigate this. Paul DePodesta was probably hacking the league computers because third down conversion percentage, it listed the Browns at 13th in the league by the end of the year. There's no way they improved to that level, Chris. I watched the games. I'm not blind.
Well, I know, but they did actually. I know you don't want to believe it, but they actually did.
It doesn't feel that way.
I know it doesn't, but they did.
Okay.
The Browns defense got better and better as the year went on.
They
did.
They
I know you don't want to hear it.
They did improve, albeit the Browns were still 27th in the red zone. That feels about right defensively. But in looking at this, I'm going to go with the Rams in this one here. So you're saying
2 years in a row.
Yeah.
The team is going to host the Super Bowl in their stadium.
Believe it or not, yeah. And I was reading about this. It wasn't great logistically a couple of years ago for the league. Which, by the way, cry me a river anytime something's not good for the NFL and all the evil folks in the front office. But, when Minnesota hosted the Super Bowl and they were in the divisional round, it was still tough to do the turnaround on that. The turnaround this time around, we can't have the signage that makes it look like a Super Bowl and the this and the that. And so all the decorations and everything like that, they're having to do stuff off-site. They're having to whatever. To which I say, good for Roger Goodell when I hear stuff like that.
Well, I mean, it's not. They like to write stories about that, and there's hand-wringing and everything, and at the end of the day, it's not an issue.
I know, but it just makes me smile. It makes me smile.
Roger Goodell is not out there having to put posters up in the stadium.
Well, that's true.
So
that's true.
You're not. You'll be all like, "Ha ha, Roger." Roger.
Yeah. Well.
I think it's kind of neat if you had the Rams again, like the Bucs hosting the Super Bowl. That's kind of cool.
Well,
I mean, we've never seen it in the course of his entire history of the league, and all of a sudden, 2 years in a row, they bench you.
albeit,
Look what's happening.
albeit,
the
what?
mean.
Right. Well,
it's never happened. We've had 50 without it. Now we're going to have 50 in a row.
Two things about it. First of all, let me be the guy from the actually meme, because there were times where it was at least close to that. The Rams, actually, the only time they ever made the Super Bowl prior to the '99 season, the Super Bowl was in the Rose Bowl when they were playing.
That's true. It was in Pasadena.
The Pasadena. So home market plus. My Dolphins had to go to Stanford Stadium to play the 49ers in the Super Bowl back in after the '84 season. So there was that. So there have been examples where a team's been in its home market. But the other thing I got to say is you're missing the other common denominator, Chris. This is going to be twice in a row now, if we're right, for Kansas City. And Kansas City's going to be sitting here going, can't we play on a neutral field one of these years?
That actually makes me laugh. I wouldn't mind that, because all the talk about the Chiefs and all the Chiefs fans, like, they're going to win 10 Super Bowls with Patrick Mahomes. And we were like, okay, let's see.
Yeah.
Don't get too far ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
So, that would actually be funny if 2 years in a row they had to play somebody in their home stadium.
Exactly.
And they lost them both.
Exactly. And I will tell you, I go back to this, and there are certain football games that are so great that even somebody that's not into pro football admits that it's a great game. And in this instance, that would be my dad. He and I were on the road. I remember that legendary Monday night game, I think it was 2 years ago, Kansas City and the Rams, that they had there. The one that went back and forth, and one of the great games ever, really. And so to see these teams get matched up.
That was amazing. What was it, 50-something to 50-something?
It was like, I think, 54-48 in overtime, I think. And
that was an amazing game.
The Rams won that game. Yes, it was. It was just, and here's the thing, though, too. It was one of those things where, like, going in, everybody was expecting, as they would say in the world of pro wrestling, a 5-star match, and it actually delivered. Mm-hmm. I mean, it actually lived up to it, if not exceeded it. So they're going to have a lot to live up to if they face each other again here. That game's going to be getting played an awful lot as far as people referencing it and whatever. So that's my pick for the Super Bowl. It's sort of your pick because, like you said, if you had it to make fresh, you would go with the Rams. But, again, pot committed on the 49ers here. I respect that.
I'm in, so I'm going to say 49ers for 6 in a row, the upset somehow. I don't really believe in it, but I'm pot committed, so here I go.
Well, the thing I respect most about that, and the thing I identify most about that with, is that either way it goes, you can say, that's what I picked. And so that's what I respect.
You will remind me, that is not what you picked. You had an opportunity to amend your wager, sir, and you didn't do it.
Well,
it's more important for me to be right from the preseason pick than it is for me to be right now.
Chris, let me just say, ever since I met you, I knew that you one day in your future had this phrase in your future. Permission to revise and extend my remarks?
Exactly.
So we'll have to see how it plays out, but going to enjoy the games this weekend. It's going to be awesome, and look forward to catching up on the NFL with you in the not-too-distant future. Thank you for being here for an unforgettable Championship Sunday preview, my man.
Hey, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Appreciate it, pal. Thank you for joining Chris Galloway and Rick Morris breaking down the Championship Sunday field in 2022.